One more aspect that's stressed by GPT chat, it's the cult of personality and strong leadership in both areas. There was a strong emphasis on charismatic leadership, as you already told, and a cult of personality around the leaders. Adolf Hitler in Germany and Vladimir Putin in modern Russia both cultivated a strong and dominant image, projecting themselves as the decisive leaders. In this point of view, I wanted to ask you the question that we here in Ukraine are trying to, it's arguable very much, because when some good Russians say that it's just Putin, it's not society, but other experts, for example, from Eastern Europe, our colleagues from different other countries say that no, there's a mutual guilt because the society gave the power to Putin through all these 24 actually almost 24 years. So year by year, his period as a president, then prime minister, and then again president, they gave him much more power to decide to be like who? Like Tsar, like who imagines him in this situation? And is it the mutual guilt? How do you think this so-called the cult of personality in this situation for Russia?
Well, again, generally speaking, I'm in agreement with what you're saying. I would just add a few nuances. One is when it comes to starting the war, clearly Putin and his inner circle bear the vast majority of the responsibility and the guilt. Putin made the decision apparently pretty much on his own, together with a few of his advisors. There may even have been some opposition within the FSB and the general staff. So in any case, he bears the primary responsibility for starting the war. That said, he's not the only one on the battlefield. There are hundreds and thousands of Russians fighting the war. There are possibly tens of thousands who have engaged in various kinds of atrocities. The Russians, again, I understand the difficulty and the complexity and the choices that Russians have to make when they're drafted for the war. Do they stay? Do they join? Do they run away? Do they hide? Do they go to prison? But the bottom line is the vast majority have, in fact, permitted themselves to be drafted. They are fighting on the battlefront, sometimes with great enthusiasm, sometimes with less enthusiasm. They are making the war possible. They are making the continuation of the war possible. And like it or not, the mere fact that they are fighting on the side of Putin makes them responsible for the war. Perhaps not guilty in the sense that Putin is, but certainly responsible. And of course, those who are killing civilians, who engage in atrocities, are also guilty of war crimes, of crimes against humanity, as well as of genocide. More generally, you're absolutely right to say that Putin has enjoyed enormous popularity amongst the Russian population virtually from the very first day that he came into office. His ratings have been somewhere between 65 and 85% from the very beginning. So there's no avoiding the conclusion that he is, in fact, a popular fascist dictator. But of course, so is Mussolini. And of course, so is Hitler. And if we're going to be consistent, and we should be, we argue always that the Germans bear some responsibility, indeed some guilt, and certainly some responsibility for Hitler's crimes. We say the same about the Italians. And we should, for the sake of logical consistency as well as moral consistency, say the same about Russians. They bear responsibility for the fascist regime. They bear responsibility for the actions of the fascist regime, for its genocide in Chechnya, for its invasion of Georgia, for its invasion of Ukraine. Unfortunately, like it or not, Russians bear responsibility for the behavior, for the actions of this regime. Now, if the regime had not been popular, if Putin's ratings were always 10 or 15%, then one could argue legitimately that the Russians had no choice, that they didn't perhaps support the regime, but because of the coercion and the violence, they were afraid, something like that. And we could give them the benefit of the doubt. But when 85% support Putin consistently,